Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1 David Deakin. We warmly welcome the family of Sapper Gilbert Brooks, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching this ceremony broadcast around Australia. Also this evening we are honoured to welcome Colonel Todd McDowell, Director of Operations and International Law Directorate, United States of America. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors as well as students on behalf of the following schools. From South Australia, Trinity College, Gawler, and from Western Australia, Perth Modern Senior High School. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you, girls and boys. You may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we pay tribute to Sapper Gilbert Brooks, who was killed in action on active service with the 2nd Australian Imperial Force during the Second World War. Born in Townsville on the 11th of August 1921, Gilbert Brooks was the son of James Stewart Brooks, a veteran of the First World War, and Alice Brooks. Growing up, the young Gilbert Brooks attended Milton State School on the south coast of New South Wales and Petrie Terrace Boys' School in Brisbane. Following his schooling, he began work as an apprentice cabinet maker. Shortly after the outbreak of the Second World War, the Australian government announced the raising of an all-volunteer force for overseas service, the 2nd Imperial Force. Brooks was among the first wave of volunteers when enlistment stations opened, enlisting in Brisbane on the 20th of October 1939. Just 18 years old at the time, Brooks had enlisted underage against his mother's will, telling recruitment officers that he was 20 years old. He was then marched into Ingleburn Camp and posted to the 2nd 13th Field Company of the Royal Australian Engineers. This company would later form part of the 7th Division Engineers and was attached to the 18th Brigade. On the 7th of June 1940, Brooks's unit embarked for overseas service, sailing in a convoy that included the famous ocean liners turned troop ships, the Queen Mary, Mauritania and the Empress of Canada, and disembarked at Greenock, Scotland, before travelling to Salisbury Plain for training. In Britain, Brooks paraded before King George VI, who visited all the Australian units that had been stationed in Britain at this time. A newspaper photograph showed the King as he walked past Brooks, standing to attention. In late 1940 and early 1941, the 18th Brigade was transferred to the Middle East. Brooks departed on the 14th of November from Liverpool. In March 1941, the 18th Brigade took part in the attack on the Italian stronghold of Jirabab, an oasis in the Libyan desert that had been fortified and garrisoned to form the southernmost Italian frontier post. A few weeks later, the brigade formed part of the British and Commonwealth garrison that occupied Tobruk. Holding Tobruk was vital for the Allied defence of Egypt and the Suez Canal, as it forced the enemy to bring most of their supplies overland from the port of Tripoli across 1,500 kilometres of desert, as well as diverting troops from their advance. Tobruk was subject to repeated ground assaults and almost constant shelling and bombing. The Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navy provided the garrison's link to the outside world. The so-called Tobruk ferry carrying reinforcements and supplies in and wounded and prisoners out. The siege of Tobruk would last until the end of 1941. On the 23rd of June 1941, Brooks was killed in action during heavy fighting at Tobruk. He was 19 years old. His body is buried in the British and Commonwealth War Cemetery at Tobruk. Sapper Gilbert Brooks's name is listed here on the honour roll on my left, amongst some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed this afternoon beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the War Memorial. We now remember Sapper Gilbert Brooks, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.